Welcome back. Today we will start to unpack the inner psychological resources, ideas, emotions, and decision-making. We start with decision-making. We have already discovered how decisions are the definition of life. That what makes our identity unique from every other person on earth comes from the sum total of every decision we have ever made. We decide on our preferences, and then we find that we use our boundary to enforce these preferences, giving our identity its shape, and then store the results as data describing our self-image. But when did we start making decisions? How old were we? How did we learn to make the decisions we make? How did we know we were making the right decisions? Are we really making decisions for ourselves? Or are we making the decisions we were taught to make by others? Why did you decide to learn English? What about Mongolian made you think that that wasn't the right language for you? What about being Catholic? Why that and not Hinduism or Islam? What about your name? Why did you choose that name, or was your name chosen for you? And if we are not making these decisions, then whose life are we living? And what about the decisions we make about health and wealth? Are we just following a path of decisions we made for ourselves, or are we still operating out of decisions that adults made for us as children? On a scale of 1 to 10, how fulfilled are you with these choices? It is not important that we change our names, learn another language, or change religion. At a certain point, it becomes impractical. But it is important to understand what informs our decision-making and how we have been taught to think about decisions. Decisions are more than the definition of life. They are also the definition of growth and maturity. Decision quality marks how far along we are in psychological maturity. And there is an exact way of measuring this. The more mature we are, the closer and more equipped we are to have durable fulfillment. Many people get caught at a young age in a kind of pattern of decisions that is characteristic of the level of maturity that they are at. We call these ego defenses. Examples of these could be using a victim attitude, holding grudges, being passive-aggressive, being a gossip, seeing things in only black and white, blaming others for their problems, and denial. These are all habits we make for a certain style of decision. In this case, these are all immature ego defenses. Decisions are responsible for our growth when we use observing ego to analyze them. Whole collections of decisions that are similar in nature that then go underground and on autopilot are called habits. Every decision you have ever made has been either constructive or destructive. This means that we also have constructive and destructive habits. These constructive and destructive habits are called mature or immature ego defenses. Destructiveness is what we call win-lose thinking and behavior. It is an immature, childish mode of being that sees the world from a place of scarcity, that there isn't enough good to go around for everyone. We call this destructive mode narcissism because we believe we cannot feel good unless someone else feels bad. We believe that we can't be right unless someone else is wrong. It is the force behind childishness, criminality, and even what theologians call sin or evil in the world. Constructiveness is what we call win-win thinking and behavior. A mature, patient, team-oriented mode of being that sees the world as a place of abundance, where there is enough love, success, and freedom to go around for everyone. In this mode of decision style, a person sees every action they do as potentially also useful to others, and sees opinions wide and varied in the world. In some ways, we are all correct. In this sense, it respects the boundary of others and their inalienable right to an opinion. Constructiveness, then, is the force behind society, civilization, and moral growth. Decisions exist on a spectrum of function, fed by two subtypes of resources called intuition and conscience. Conscience is our sense of morality, right versus wrong, our ethics, and amounts to a sense that tells us whether our thinking and behavior is being constructive or destructive to the environment. Intuition is an inner resource representing the other end of the decision-making spectrum. It is our sense of shrewdness, being street smart, and being world-wise. It is a kind of sense of estimation of various kinds of environments, to know which ones are likely to be destructive to us and which ones are likely to be constructive to us. It is recognizing when we are being manipulated and recognizing when we are being nourished. The middle point of this spectrum is wisdom, a balance of conscience and intuition perfectly balanced to the requirements of the environment and the desires that we have. When we have wisdom, society wants to give us more and more freedom because almost everything we do benefits society through win-win behavior. So question, why do people end up in jail? Is it because they were born bad? No, it is because they continue to make destructive decisions that harm other people and society as a whole. So what we do is arrest them and take away their ability to make destructive decisions. Equally, when students fight in school, they are making a destructive decision that makes the school less safe. This is why students get suspended. It is not because they are bad people, only that the decisions they make are destructive. Habits are clusters of decisions that have momentum in them. If you have a ton of similar decisions, then you have a lot of weight to the habit, giving it momentum. And if you tend to make similar decisions quickly and efficiently, you tend to further accelerate that habit. If you decide to have a donut every morning, first thing in the morning, you will create a habit that does not support physical health. Instead, if you drink a glass of water first thing in the morning, you make a decision to practice making healthy decisions. One choice is only better than the other depending on your goal. It is okay to make mistakes. Mistakes are part of learning, and learning from experience helps us make better decisions. We can make mistakes and then make a new kind of decision on the next try. This is what we call iteration, and requires adjusting our course on the way to our goals. First, we use observing ego to measure the results we produce. Did we achieve what we set out to achieve? Second, we analyze and learn from those results. Third, we make an adjustment and try again. We do this again and again until we have a reliable formula for what works in our lives and we can repeatedly get our desired outcomes. We call this process iteration, and a journal is a great tool for this. We can look back over our journal entries and witness how much we've grown and changed over a period of time, and ensure that we are growing and changing in the direction we intend to grow. Once we use this process of iteration to hone our formula for success, our decisions start to routinely get us good results in life, and the environment is constructive toward us. We can let this formula work on autopilot because we have created a constructive habit. Destructive habits largely stem from being mindless about decisions. Constructive habits require mindful observation in the present moment, using all 5 senses to develop. In the realm of decision-making, you cannot fall into the trap of analysis paralysis, waiting for 100% complete information before you make a decision. There will always be something you don't know that you don't know. We will never know everything, but we can't let that stop us from making decisions. Making good decisions takes practice. Nobody is working from complete information. Learning from the decisions we make and the decisions others make helps to accelerate this process. This requires a present moment mindset of experiencing the world through all 5 of our senses. One driver of destructive decision-making is immature ego defenses. Immature ego defenses equal bad habits, equal destructive autopilot patterns, equal childishness, equal narcissism, equal criminality, equals bad, equals sin, equals life-diminishing habits, which ultimately leaves us feeling less alive in the long term. Examples of immature ego defenses are seeing things in only black and white, denial, gossip, blaming others, resisting authority figures or rebelling for no reason, holding grudges, masochism, which is blaming ourselves rather than changing ourselves, dependence that carries hopelessness and helplessness with it. All lying, stealing, murder, slander, libeling, jealousy, cowardice, regret, revenge, and all of the 7 deadly sins, worry, aggression, sadism, manipulation, or any other win-lose way of being that hurts or uses others in order to benefit ourselves. Please note, when we talk about sin here, we are referring to the ancient Hebrew meaning of the word, to miss the mark. Immature ego defenses are driving sinful behavior and keeping you from fulfillment. It has nothing to do with guilt and shame, eternal damnation, or punishment. It is a punishment we levy on ourselves because in the long term, we feel less alive. On the other hand, mature ego defenses equal constructive habits, equals constructive autopilot, equals spiritual enlightenment, equals virtue, equals good, equals righteousness, equals life-affirming habits that leave us feeling more fulfilled. They are fewer, but include altruism. Altruism is a belief in the selfless concern for others. It also includes humor, patience, or waiting until the right time to act, anticipation, assertiveness, courage, and sublimation, which is taking an uncontrollable situation and taking control of what can be controlled. Notice how all immature ego defenses have 2 things in common. They are win-lose methods of habit with poor boundary function. And also notice that mature ego defenses are win-win methods of habit with good boundary function. Over time, we want to continue to notice our behaviors and go from right to left on the chart. Observing ego is the skill that helps to transform destructive, childlike, immature ego defenses into healthy, constructive, mature ego defenses. We engage in this process of maturity. We can see that it involves so much more than growing hair in our underarms. Faulting children for being immature is counterproductive. This is why, as society, we limit their autonomy until the age of 18. They don't have enough experience to accurately distinguish the consequences of their decision-making. It is our responsibility as adults to help them make distinctions. This model will help to empower us to spell out what we mean when we want children to be more mature. We must give them a safe environment to practice in. We're now going to play a game that helps to illustrate how decision-making works in the real world. The game is called The Prisoner's Dilemma. It was designed by mathematician John Nash. 2 opponents are pitted against each other in an interrogation by authorities. The 2 players are charged with being accomplices in a crime. Each suspect is arrested separately and interrogated separately. The two suspects have no means of communication and do not know what the other is thinking unless that information is delivered by the jailer. This is the game. If you confess to the crime and your partner denies the crime, she goes to jail and you go free. If you deny the crime and she confesses, then she goes to jail. If both of you confess, you both get parole. If both of you deny it, you both get the electric chair. In the study of the students, Nash found that students created strategies based solely on what was in their own heads, their worldview, not the objective evidence in the environment. They had no choice. The experiment removed all objective evidence from the environment. The suspects had been arrested separately and were in separate rooms. They couldn't possibly know what the other is thinking unless it was relayed by the jailer. We can never know exactly what another person is thinking, nor exactly what they believe. We might know someone and think we have a good read on them, but we will never know exactly what the other person is thinking. Two prime strategies emerged on a spectrum of function. On one end of the spectrum were those who used the golden rule, do unto others as you would have done to you. These students would frequently confess to the crime out of the kindness of their own hearts. They were willing to give up their freedom so that the other person would go free, and maybe they expected to be magically rewarded for playing the victim. They would let themselves lose so that the partner could win, or simply give up the game in frustration. These students quickly lost the game. They never did get rewarded for playing the fool or being a martyr. This approach uses too much conscience with holes in the personal boundary. On the other end of the spectrum, the students would use what some have called the iron rule approach, or an eye for an eye. You hurt me, I hurt you. These students would typically deny the crime every time. With each repeated interrogation, they hoped their partner would make the 50% change of giving in and confessing in the hopes of getting parole. The players would be informed of the outcome of each of a series of interrogations, so sometimes their opponents would change their approach. This iron rule approach is also a win-lose mode of playing, but because of its aggression, the players who used it would at least have a temporary series of wins. However, their aggressive, cutthroat method would be picked up on by the opponent friend and be shut down, met with the same iron rule strategy back, which led both players to the electric chair. A temporary high of winning, but eventual loss for both players. When applied to life, it becomes apparent that neither the golden rule nor the iron rule is a winning strategy for long-term benefits for all players. The golden rule only works if every player in a system is doing it every time. The iron rule provides temporary quick fix wins. Halfway between the golden rule and the iron rule is a point of balance, one where you try to compromise. The best outcome occurs when a person, met with aggression, would subdue the aggression with the iron rule, then ease back towards the golden rule again if the opponent friend turned around to do the right thing, the constructive thing, to forgive and forget. This is sometimes called talk softly but carry a big stick. Because if you do not have the capacity for aggression, you are not peaceful. You are harmless. People have to know that you will report them, you will tell an adult, or otherwise hold them accountable if they are being destructive to you or others and refuse to stop. Conscience is using too much golden rule on one end of the spectrum, too much naivete to match the social environment. Intuition is using too much iron rule on the other end of the spectrum, too much shrewdness and amorality to match the circumstances. Wisdom is using them both in appropriate alternation. Simply put, conscience is an inner sense that we are doing right or wrong, being constructive or destructive. Intuition is an inner sense of knowing if the environment is being constructive or destructive back to us, prior to actually finding out the facts of what the environment is doing. The students who used the golden rule did not have enough intuition to know that sometimes their opponent friend in the prisoner's dilemma was selling out on them because they were naive. The students who used the iron rule did not have enough social conscience to know that while they are beating down their opponent friend with such aggression, they were eventually to defeat themselves with such overly hostile negotiations. Once the opponent friend learned that the iron rule opponent was trying to sell him out, he became aggressive in return. We need each other in the long term, even if we complete in the short term. So the only way to win in the game of life is to strive to take action that benefits ourselves and others simultaneously. This is why it is so critical to only accept win-win offers and reject win-lose offers, even if you are on the winning end. At birth, we have two empty tanks. One is for conscience and one is for intuition. Life is an endless series of decisions. Any decision is better than no decision. Even a bad decision can be learned from. Every decision we make fills us up with a little new conscience and a little new intuition. We reward ourselves with every decision we make, regardless of the outcome. With mindful observation of the results we produce, we can practice and perfect our processes until we can consistently get constructive results. In the speech they give on airlines about oxygen masks, notice that they always say, "Put your mask on first," even before children. But why? Because if we are too concerned with helping others put on their masks before we have put on our own mask, we could die and nobody gets helped. If we put our mask on first, we will be able to help others, even if one perishes in the short term. Maturity is understanding that you can't help anyone else if you haven't first helped yourself. Do your homework first before you spend your time helping your classmates. Cut your own grass before you help your neighbor with theirs. This is not being selfish. This is being responsible and mature. Finally, understanding the context of a situation is imperative if you are to make constructive decisions. To illustrate this, I ask you, should I scream at the top of my lungs? If the context is inside a shopping center, then the answer is probably not. But if I am in danger or distress and need help from the people around me, then yes, it is absolutely imperative that I scream at the top of my lungs. So now we're going to turn to the second inner resources, our intellect or our data. Our intellect is composed of information or data that takes many forms. These could be beliefs, values, life history, education, and experiences, all of which, when working in balance, contribute to our success. Like decision-making, intellect also exists on a spectrum and is arranged from organized data or logic to chaos or free association, what we might call creativity. Imagine that you are reaching for a difficult goal. All kinds of obstacles, random changes in the environment outside of your boundary are in your way to that goal. By definition, a goal is outside of our boundary, something we work toward. If we only used one intellectual style, we would find that as soon as environmental conditions changed or a new obstacle arose, we would soon suffer failure to get to our goal. At this point, we may even quit. But this is where having awareness of this spectrum can help us match the demands of the ever-changing environment to the appropriate thinking style. One end of the spectrum is organized, logical, linear, and history-based. This would be the part of your brain that is like a computer hard drive. We call it left brain, and it helps with doing repetitive tasks. This is formal education, or book smarts, the structured and orderly organization of information. The other end of the spectrum is flexible, chaotic, disorganized, free association, or what we might call creative intelligence. If this was part of a computer, we might call it the internet. We call this right brain thinking. We fill this part of our brain with experience or street smarts. This is the kind of data that can only be acquired through living through something, exploring with your 5 senses. When you can fill both tanks in balance, it is called intelligence. At perfection, we call it genius, and genius is possible for more of us than we realize. Just striving for genius makes you exponentially more likely to succeed because filling both tanks with book smarts and experiences helps to get through obstacles more efficiently. By studying and experimenting, we can create paths to success that we never even imagined were possible. As we make attempts at success and avoid failure, we also spend that limited and special currency that we call time. Remember, time is the one resource that we only have a limited amount of. What we spend our time doing is the clearest indicator of what kind of life we will have. When we master both ends of this intellect spectrum, we can master any challenge to success, any obstacle between us and our goal, and we maximize the use of time. Unfortunately, schools, by their nature, favor left brain logical thinkers. Institutions are logical, structured, and organized by their nature. Some students don't do well academically because they are more creative and right-brained than their left-brain classmates. If you are one of these types of students, do not be discouraged. Understand that not getting good grades in a left-brain world does not mean that you are dumb. Your intelligence is different, and it is incumbent upon each one of us to identify our unique intelligence and develop it toward genius. We all have both orderly and chaotic functioning, left brain and right brain. Imagine learning how to drive a car. Education will teach us how to start a car. We only need to learn that once. Put on your seatbelt, press the brake, put the key in the ignition, and start the car. Then we have to learn by experiencing what it feels like to start a car. How hard do I have to pull the door closed? What does the click of the seatbelt sound like? How much pressure do I need to apply to the brake? Without the education, we may break the car, especially if it is a manual transmission, while we try to figure out how to start it. No matter what we want to master in life, we will need both education and experience. No matter if we want to be a doctor, a lawyer, a firefighter, a plumber, you will need education and experience. If you can't afford college, get experience until you can afford college. Then take classes to make better use of your experience. If you have experience, get an education. Filling both tanks will help you make better decisions and present more opportunities for success. If you can't afford a formal education, learn on YouTube or other places you can find lessons until you can afford a formal education. These days, a formal education is there to prove to other people that you have done the work to master a particular subject. All the information you need is online. It is up to each one of us to seek out the information that will move us toward the success we desire. If we fail to fill up our left brain tank with enough logical, orderly education, we can tend to miss a goal by getting lost along the way. Our education is our logical, orderly, history-based tank that helps us to keep our sights on a goal and identify what is probable. Right brain thinking style is the realm of dreamers and big imaginations. They have a dream, but they might never do the real work and discipline of making those great ideas practical. These types of people oftentimes feel lost because their dreams have no structure for becoming real. When an environment demands high flexibility around chaos, people who are overly right-brained do very well. They often find jobs that are unstructured, like being an artist or being a waiter or waitress. In extreme cases, some of these personality types might be diagnosed with attention deficit disorder. Medicines may be required to help with a formal diagnosis like that, but for the rest of us with these tendencies, we need more practice with left brain, orderly, logical thinking. If we fail to fill up our right brain experience tank with learning, we will continue to crash into obstacles, doing things repeatedly the same way and expecting different results. In the extreme, these personalities might be considered obsessive, and they might be so extreme that they are diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder. But for the rest of us, what this means is we need to have more experiences so that we can be creative when negotiating obstacles and the randomness of the environment. Imagine you're in a car making a trip from Maritzo to Jigo. A left-brain driver would take you straight there no matter what. If the road was washed out, he would drive through the river. If there was a traffic jam, he would stay on course and sit in traffic. You might never make it to Jigo because he didn't have enough flexibility to get around the obstacles. On the other hand, a right-brained creative thinker might take that same trip, but first stop at a friend's house, then go to Cross Island Road, drive through Ipan to check out the ocean, drive up to Jontya, drive through the village and check out the houses before parking in Pago Bay and taking a swim. With all of these detours, he might never get to Jigo. He got lost because he lost focus on the goal. Again, journals can help you stay focused on your goals. Our left brain functioning can be used destructively, imagining that for me to be right, others have to be wrong. Intellectual narcissism or destructiveness takes the form of being judgmental or prejudiced. When we call right brain, creative thinkers, dreamers, hippies, or slackers, we are judging them and being prejudiced, labeling them as someone who doesn't do real work with discipline or who is below us or less than us. Right brain functioning can also be destructive by imagining that our personal vision of reality is the universal standard. This is called ignorance. From this perspective, we might think that a left brain, logical, organized person is boring and be unwilling to see how their way of life and doing life is right for them. I have to take a moment and say that the idea of boring is completely underappreciated. Boring can actually be great. Boring can mean that everything is going as planned. Dramatic surprises are not always a good thing. Both of these views of reality, being judgmental and being ignorant, are immature and destructive. In order to be right, the other has to be wrong, rather than seeing that both styles are valid and useful depending on the context. Narcissism sees the world as a place of scarcity, that there isn't enough goodness to go around for everyone. Imagine if you and a friend worked at the same department and had the same job skills. She gets promoted and you don't. If you are destructive, narcissistic, you would see her in a negative light and secretly wish she would fail. You would see her in a negative light and secretly wish she would fail because you don't believe that there are enough good jobs to go around. You think that because she won a better job, it means that you lost. If instead you are not narcissistic, but had healthy pride and see the world as a place of abundance, then you would be truly happy for her promotion because you see that if she could do it, that you too could also do it. Maybe you would have to apply at a different company or to a different department, but there are more than enough jobs to go around in that great big world out there. You are able to see both of your views as being or having a right to exist, even if they differ. Being judgmental or choosing to ignore comes from being in denial, which comes from having a boundary hole. People who are judgmental and ignorant project these very same character traits onto others. We end up calling everyone else ignorant or judgmental when it is really us being ignorant or judgmental. If instead we can honor that each person's experience of reality is true for them, we would find that the actual truth is the average of every opinion in the world. Reality is relative to personal experience. None of us are absolutely right, but we are all right together. It is okay if you find yourself being judgmental or ignorant. This is part of being human. Just know that you will need to change this childish style if you want to be successful in life. Fixing this problem of being judgmental takes doing the constructive instead of the destructive thing. This is to be curious. Curiosity, you can be as logical and orderly as you like, but you must remember to be open to new facts or information that comes from the education of others. Curiosity strives to value everyone's experience. Fixing the problem of being ignorant requires being open to the well-earned experience of others. It requires being open to the opinions or creativity of others and understanding that just because it is wrong for you does not mean that it is wrong for them. This process is called collaborative imagination, and it respects the boundary of others by not assuming that we can possibly know what they are thinking in their private minds. When working on a creative goal, it is important to invite the creativity of all partners and include their creativity and experience. Not doing this is like only using one website for a research project rather than using the whole internet. On that note, I want to remind you, do not take anything that we are learning in this program as the truth. What we are doing today is exploring a model, a way of thinking. It is up to you to try it on and see if it works for you. If it does, great, keep using it. And if it doesn't, that is also okay. Keep searching for what does work for you. If you feel like you are doing the same thing over and over and getting the exact results that you don't want, then you are having a failure of creativity and need to fill up with experience. Go travel, watch a creative performance, take an acting class, shake up your imagination with new experiences. If you have a lot of experience but you don't feel you are making progress, then it's time for some education. Take some classes, find a mentor, read some books, attend some training, or solicit advice from others who have already succeeded in the way that you want to be successful. When you can master this part of yourself, your intellect, you can master time. Time is the currency of the intellect. This is why professionals with lots of education and experience get paid the most. In theory, they can get more done in less time. They are more efficient at doing their jobs, resulting in success more consistently and with less effort.